In the early 1970s, for those of you who were there was a TV show called The Odd Couple. And The Odd Couple was actually based on a Broadway play that was written, years before. But The Odd Couple was a TV show about two men in various circumstances of their life that were sort of acquaintances, but suddenly found themselves in the same household, living together, trying to make it work. And the energy and the comedy came from these two men who were now in the same household because their marriages had failed, living together, Oscar Madison and Felix Unger. Oscar was a slob and Felix was a neat freak. And now they're living together. And that energy, those mannerisms, their characteristics served the comedy and them trying to work it out in that difficult situation they found themselves in. And today we celebrate the solemnity of Peter and Paul. Now, there are many things that these two men have in common. The founders of the Church of Rome. They are former Jewish people. They're both Jewish, but they're new to the church. They were both converted by Jesus Christ, one in earthly ministry, Peter, and Paul, the resurrected Jesus, converted him. Loved the church, and were there to gather people to this new church, the Church of Christ. And as you see, because I'm wearing red today and everything's colored in red, they both were martyred, one by an upside-down cross. Peter and Paul was decapitated. Both died violent, bloody deaths. But that's kind of where their things that they had in common kind of end. They had different calls, different gifts, different experiences, different mannerisms, different attitudes. Same church, new church. And as we know from the scriptures, it said, even though they were the pillars of the Church of Rome, they didn't always get along. Actually, it's documented in the book of Galatians, where Paul gets into Peter's face, and he was right, because he had done something to disrespect the new Gentile Christians. So let's see what their roles are. Actually, you know what? Billy, could you put that image of the two of them up there, that painting where it said if you want to visit the church or something like that? You'll see they both, Peter and Paul, have books in their hands because they wrote part of the scriptures. One has keys, and it's kind of hard to see, but they're there. And one has a sword. One has a sword. I want you to keep that in mind when you see their different roles, different callings, both important. Peter, to start a church, keys of an office, a household, a building, a family. To do what? To nurture, feed with word and sacrament, to be a father, to be an overseer, a bishop, a priest. Now, Paul had some of that. But his primary mission field were the lost tribes of Israel, the Jewish people. Jesus even told him, don't go to the Gentile area. Go to the Jews first. Gather them, convert them, sacramentalize them. Tell them about this new way. That was his job. To be a father, to gather, and to strengthen his brother bishops. That was his job. Then we look at Paul, the one with the sword. His job was to evangelize, teach, preach, to go on mission, to engage the Gentile people and all that were against the faith, to debate, convince, cajole. Both important, two different charisms, two different dynamics, different energies. You could even say two different personalities. But to look at that, you might be tempted to say, Well, doesn't that make them an odd couple? I would say, like all couples, when their differences and gifts are in sync, I would call them a power couple. They're a power couple. So I'm going to give you the definition I found on power couple on Wikipedia. So here we go. Oftentimes it's associated with a married couple, a romantic couple, but not always. Not always. It says here that a power couple is two people, often well known and admired, with their combined influence and achievements, perceived as greater than the sum of their individual successes. Let me read that again. A power couple is defined as two people often well known and admired, with their combined influences and achievements perceived as greater than the sum of their individual successes. I would say when those two get together, that they complement each other. That they complement each other. That's what all parish life, family life, church life should be. And I think the church now uses different verbiage to talk about family and mission. Sometimes it uses the term, I know that the Amazing Parish Model uses the term going from maintenance to mission. Both are important in any family, even in your own household. Maintenance is important. But in a church, if you're just doing maintenance, that means just making sure everything's mopped and electricity on, AC works, and that's all you do and you kind of circle the wagons, well, that's a church that is dying. Maybe take a little while, but that is a church that is dying. But a church that's also on mission is dedicated to growth and energy. And both of those have to work together. Now, we know that in any family, any business, any organization, that oftentimes people devoted to maintenance, those devoted to mission, often collide. I know, see it here a lot. But both have their places. They have their places. I was thinking about one of the images is those of you who have cars, you drove here, there's usually two pedals underneath the dash. A gas pedal and a brake. You need both of those. There are times when you need to step on the brake. There are times when you need to step on the gas. If you hit both of them at the same time, don't do that. Don't do that. If you've ever done that, and some of you guys have done that because I have, bad things happen. Bad things happen. You have to use them in tandem with each other. It's kind of the difference between making sure the air conditioner is working and that the turbocharger is also working. That you get to where you're going, but also caring for the people inside. And that's why I think the greatest image of that happens in your own home is in married life. Between a man and woman. Both have their charisms and their gifts. Because I think we can't call man and wife, man and woman, an odd couple. Because men and women are not compatible, they're complementary. You bring out what's best in each other. You communicate differently. You have different charisms, different energies. But if you can get those energies, charisms, communications in sync, your marriage, your family can thrive, even though it might seem odd at times. But if you don't get those in sync, your marriage and family can be in trouble. That's why it takes work. And those who do, their family can flourish. The family can flourish. Or if they're not in sync, the family will flounder. Now, these two guys, sometimes the church did flourish, and sometimes it floundered. I can only imagine the people that saw these two get into it, maybe a little bit scandalized. That's kind of like family life. Yesterday we had our marriage retreat. We kind of had two ends of the married life. We had about 5 or 6 couples on their marriage retreat, which they're engaged couples. And we do a little retreat before their wedding. And all the engaged couples come in and they go through formation. they were sitting over there. But, like last week, we blessed people who had been married 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60 years. There was a couple sitting right here that stood up, Juanita and Alfonso Cruz. They celebrated their 70th anniversary. And we were able to give them a little plaque and pray for them. Now, I visited them this past week, just picking their brains about their married life, and she told me a little story, and I'm going to share it with you today. It's a little R-rated, but I think you'll be okay. They're both Hispanic, and they speak primarily Spanish, but they speak English too. And she said, you know, Father, when we first got married, we used to fight. We used to fight sometimes. And I said, oh yeah, how did you recover from that? How did you get here? How did you stay married for 70 years? And she goes, oh, we had a system. We would fight, we would make up, and then we'd make a baby. And all their 7 or 8, 9 children with 100 grandchildren were sitting right here. I think that's a good system. Because even then it shows when they're in sync, when they forgive and reconcile, there's fruit, there's flourishness, there's life. Now, having said that, we look at these two saints and we know they had different mission fields. I think in 2025, especially John Paul II and the Pope since then, have kind of changed that dynamic to what we call a new evangelization. That we're going to have to convert, evangelize, catechize some, especially those countries and communities and people that may even consider themselves Christian, already Catholic. Somebody from our congregation just got back from Portugal, a country that's 95% Catholic. And he said he went there and only said 5% of the people go to church on Sundays. Maybe we need to go back to Portugal. But I think we also need to admit what the new evangelization says. Because if we're honest, and this is nothing against our Protestant brothers and sisters, oftentimes Catholics function and think like Protestants. Nothing against Protestants. But they'll use those kind of verbiage. Oh, I don't need to go to Mass and confession. I have Jesus, I pray, and I have my Bible. That's what Protestants say. But we remember it happens here at the altar, at the sacrifice, that community matters and sacraments are what the most important thing that we do. But even other Christians kind of function as practical atheists. People who even call themselves Christian and the secular world. And to look out that oftentimes people are proud of things they should be embarrassed of and embarrassed by things they should be proud of. There are Christians out there that are celebrating our deadliest of deadly sins, pride, and adopted even some of their language. Oh yeah, I believe in God, but you know, love is love and my body, my choice. Oftentimes they even start to worship the world, nature, the earth. I'd ask any of you, go to Google or any of those platforms and put in the search engine, just stop oil. And you see, especially in England, there are people out there risking their lives, putting their bodies in front of 18-wheelers and trucks and traffic to save us from fossil fuels. Willing to jam up society. There was a guy at one of the English soccer games who ran out and tied his neck to a soccer goal post. Just stop oil. Smoke coming out of his shoe. For what? To save us from fossil fuels. To worship nature instead of the God who's the creator. So we have to ask for both energies, both charisms, because we have a robust maintenance. We have to do that. It starts here at the altar, the sacraments, outreach, catechism, catechesis, even making sure the AC works in here and the electric bill is paid. Those things are important. But also to be in sync and align with a dynamic mission that the world needs the church more than ever. And all of a sudden they look at us as odd, and that's okay. In some ways we are. But if we get that oddness part of us in sync, we can have a powerful church, a flourishing church.